What is up, everybody, and welcome back to Blerd It Out. We in the new season, and we're starting it off with a banger of a chapter. One Piece 1154 has dropped. I can't even die. Man, this is a big chapter. And I knew it was gonna be big because I saw like murmurs on Twitter about it, so I had to stay off Twitter for a while. I was even seeing stuff on TikTok, and that's when the chapter really has some motion, is when I started seeing stuff on TikTok, because normally I don't get any like current One Piece stuff there. And this chapter did not disappoint. Now, since we're back on the first episode of this season, and since this is such a big chapter, this is probably going to be a One Piece centered episode, so I won't have any of the seasonal or extra stuff at the end of this episode. We'll pick back up on that next week. But as always, if you have not caught up to the latest chapters or episodes, please know there will be spoilers ahead.
Spoilers.
Okay, 1154, I Can't Even Die. So we're still in the pilgrimage, so that's the cover story right now. And we're approaching a grave. And I initially thought, because the description is that they're at the grave of a hero born in West Blue and brought up in Ringo. And my initial thought was Ryuma, but Ryuma was not born in West Blue as far as I know. He was born in Wano. And I thought about like Izo or any of the Shimotsuki, but they were all born in Wano, so it wouldn't end up being them. So I'm not really sure whose grave this is. Or like, if I guess it could be one of those characters and maybe there's just some lore we haven't been privy to yet. But as far as I know, it's not a character we've seen before. Again, I could be wrong, but that's just, as far as I remember it, most of the people that were brought up in Ringo that are of like some renown, they were all born in Wano. But also, just to note, Ulti's rolling a snowball, super cute. Okay, so let's dive into the chapter. So we take it back 63 years ago, and this is the time period where Big Mom, or Lin Lin at the time, ended up killing Yorl. So basically she rampaged through that village looking for Selma, ended up killing one of the elder giants. And that's the same time that Loki was born and all these terrible tragedies started happening. So you have Big Mom basically wiping out the giant village, and then in Elbaf itself, you have different kinds of tragedies. Like, they had all kinds of like terrible weather. There were blizzards and windstorms, fires out of nowhere. So like their main crop line got killed off. Furthermore, like all the weather messed up the fishing, so they couldn't even fish to get food. And this put them into a terrible famine because they had no way of getting food. And while all this is happening, you still have Loki's mom just being like, yeah, it's Loki's fault. It's that cursed child's fault. You need to get rid of that thing. You need to kill it. I don't want to see it. I don't want it looking at me. And all the while, she's bedridden for reasons that aren't really clarified. But essentially, she's just trying to get Loki out of the picture. And like, Loki is just a baby, so he's just messed around with stuff. He's a bit too strong for his own good, so he's like pushing things over and accidentally breaking things. And eventually, they start dragging him away from his mom, which makes him super sad. Obviously, he's a baby. He wants to be with his mom. And even at this point, the nation is basically collapsing because they have no food. King Harold's still away. Loki's here, and everyone thinks he's basically this harbinger of the absolute end times. And it reminds me a lot of Wano when Odin left, where not necessarily everyone was distraught, but there was a large amount of people that basically ended up famished and in poverty because of the new rule. Now in Elbaf, there's no new rule, there's just a lack of rule. And what this breeds is basically civil conflict. You have different giant nations starting to attack one another. You know, that giant village has more food than us, we're gonna go take theirs. And so you have all this internal conflict stewing up and basically no one to control it. Because again, King Harold's gone. The only other royalty right now would be Loki's mom, who's bedridden and she's terrible. And then you have Loki and Heidruden, who are both too young to make any kind of impact on, you know, a nation's ruling. So it's almost becoming like a lawless nation. And the more and more they fought one another, the more and more they started to blame Loki for all of their misgivings. And the more and more they start to fight each other, the more and more cursed things happen, the more they blamed Loki for basically sending the nation to ruin. So much so that they pull up on Ida and Heidruden And they want to blame them because they're like, you're related to Loki. So technically you got to take responsibility. And that's really weird because they pulled up on Heidrun and Ida and they said, you got to take responsibility, but they don't want to do anything to Loki. And of course, this is because Ida and Heidrun are not pure blood Elbaf giants. And so they consider them outsiders. So it's like, your lives are worthless. They probably, even though they think that Loki is the curse, he is the pure blood prince. So technically they don't want to do anything to him. So they're going to take the next best thing. Now, as they're attacking Ida and Heidrun, Harold comes back and he ends up knocking out the giants that are getting ready to hurt them, which is, fitting. But essentially Harold heard of the famine and basically all of the tragedies and Loki's birth as he was at sea. But because he was out here basically building bridges with different nations, different kingdoms of the world, he made a bunch of allies. And because he has all these allies, they actually sent aid to Elbaf. So they send tons and tons and tons of food to Elbaf. And you can see like the port of Elbaf just has ships upon ships loaded with tons of food. And it's like the fruits of his labor all paid off. Because everyone gets to eat, everyone's full, and now they have this kind of debt of gratitude towards the world. Because it wasn't just, one village here, one village there, it was so many nations that he had pretty much gathered together, they all sent aid. So it's like all these people, this entire world has people in it that are willing to help us. Now at the same time, Estrid ends up passing away. And while she does so, she still believes that Loki is the root cause of all the chaos that's been happening. And to her dying breath, she says that. And honestly, good riddance. She sucked. Didn't like her as a character. She doesn't need to be here. But still, Harold takes kind of hard. And at this point, they have Loki all wrapped up. So this is where he gets the eye bandages. And they mention that he was born with a condition that affects his eyes. And they said, well, he could see, but, and then Harold says, what a pity. So I'm wondering if they covered his eyes intentionally because they didn't want Harold to see like the type of demon eyes that Loki had. Because they say that he can see. They're like, yeah, he can see fine. That's not an issue. But still they have his eyes bandaged. And he's seemingly able to see outside of these bandages, even with, like the condition that affects his eyes. So whatever condition it is, it's not something that's deteriorating his eyes. It's some kind of enhancement. It just happens to look like demon eyes. And we get kind of a sad monologue of Loki that says that at only a few months old, he had given up on love. And of course, this is the result of Estrid and everything Loki's mom did to him in the few months that he existed as a being, because she's terrible. So like Loki's descent into just not caring started so early, which is super tragic. We then cut away to Harold starting the root system, which we know like from present time, that's kind of where they had the guidelines of where villages are, where different places are in Elbaf. Like for example, they had the kids walking off one of the branch routes. So Harold essentially created that system, and that's the system they still use today. Meanwhile, with Loki, they have Estrid's older brother watching him. And clearly, Estrid's older brother has resentment towards Loki. So like we see them in the same panel, and the only thing that Estrid's brother says is that he's a freak. And we see him later on, like he's clearly mistreating Loki. Like he does not care for Loki at all. He's literally only here most likely because Harold said he had to be there. And then we cut over to a tavern, and it turns out that this is Ida's bar. Now, I think that this might be the same bar that they were in at the beginning of Elbaf, where like they partied and stuff. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is the same place, like where Colin and his mom were. Because I don't think they were in, well, I guess I'm not sure. No, they may have been in the upper realm, because right now they're in the underworld. So maybe this isn't the same bar. It looks similar, but maybe this isn't the same bar. But yeah, this is where Ida runs her tavern. And essentially this tavern is for anybody that passes by Elbaf and obviously doesn't make it, to the Sun Realm or anything. they're on that base level. They just float in. So she's like, pirates, castaways, fishermen, anybody that rolls up, I'm here to serve them. And she's kind of using this to be her way of helping Harold, which is like, it's the people that end up here probably will not end up where Harold is, but it's, you know, her doing her part where she can. Now we could have had 56 years ago, and we have Jarl and Harold talking about reverie. And Harold is talking about being basically snuck into the reverie and seeing a murder happen. Now, I don't recall a murder that happened in the reverie 56 years ago, but based on some of the events later on in the chapter, I'm thinking that it might have something to do with somebody who shows up at the end here. At least those are the pieces I fit together. So I'm guessing that the murder that happened at reverie is the same thing that we talk about at the end of this chapter. But basically, Harold's talking about how he got smuggled in and he almost was exposed. So he wasn't supposed to be there. He kind of just snuck there. But he had a ton of questions to ask, which obviously, you know, if you're not supposed to be there, you can't really ask the questions. But he had a lot of curiosities about the world. Now, if we recall, at some point, King Harold and Shanks do talk. I'm imagining it's not this one, because I don't even think Shanks is born yet. Yeah, 56 years ago, Shanks isn't even born yet, so it can't be this one. But so at some point, King Harold does go back to Reverie as an invited guest and probably has his own questions. And that's also probably where that whole deal comes in with the Gods Knights. That's probably where all that comes into play. Now, Jarl mentioned something of the Galley Ra Warhammer Company, which is a group of giant shipwrights, like an entire battalion. And I think it is a play on Galley La, so Galley Ra. I don't know exactly what the play would be, and it would be interesting if Galley La kind of had their inspiration based off Galley Ra. But apparently it was this band of giants that traveled the world, and essentially they all got captured by the world government. Now, there are over 100 giants there, including ancient giants, and they said all of them have been captured. And that's insane, because we're talking about ancient giants. We're talking about, you know, numbers type people, ores type people being captured along with 100 other giants in the mix of 100 other giants. So the force that they needed to capture these giants would have been astronomical. It would make me think that they used ancient weapons of some kind, but they suss out that the world government is probably responsible for it. And Jarl says that essentially they've faced a great enemy a long time ago. We know it, that's the hidden kingdom that we haven't learned about yet, but that definitely exists. But they sink into the ocean at a point in history, which is the Void Century. And Jarl says that basically what happened there is probably why he's having issues with all these formalities, trying to unite the world, trying to get everyone together. Those things are probably deeply related. And Jarl also mentions that there are frozen armies of giants somewhere. And my immediate thought was to go to Thriller Bark, but if I recall, and I think this is 56 years ago, Thriller Bark I don't believe exists yet. The other place I was thinking about was Punk Hazard, but to be honest, I don't know if that was set up either. So this frozen army of giants, I don't know where they would be. But the way Jarl mentions it, he says frozen as if they were frozen as enemies. So like someone froze them because they were enemies at some point and there was a fight. Not like, you know, they were just somewhere and got frozen. Like this was intentional freezing. And this kind of just hardens Harold's resolve to basically go against any hurdle he faces out there. So he's going to go back out there, get back on that horse and try to keep, you know, making relations. In the meantime, we cut over to Loki, and people are still blaming him for everything. Like someone's little sister passes, they blame it on Loki. And then you have Estrid's brother trying to feed Loki garbage. The horse dies, the horse of fortune that we talked about before. And then the steward, who is Estrid's brother, ends up dying in the realm of the dead, mysteriously. And it's just like, yeah, they blame all this on Loki. And we cut a little bit more, 48 years before present day, and Harold's out in the seas again. So he's still trying to basically push this idea that I want to gather all the nations together in like hands of peace and cooperation. And he wants the giant race to be welcomed to all of the world. So he still has this idea, this mentality that he wants everyone to be accepting of the giants. And seeing how deep he's going with this, it does make me concerned about where he makes a turn. Somewhere along the way, he makes a turn, ties hands with the world government, and then cuts off ties with the world government. I am very curious to see what happens there. Also, I think Ida has to die at some point because one, we haven't seen her in the main story, and two, she's a giant, so if she was still alive, I'd imagine we'd still see her. Giants live to be forever years old. And this is only 56 years ago, so somebody had to have killed her, and I'm guessing that also has to do with who shows up at the end of the chapter. So we have Harold away, and we come back to Elbaf, and Loki is just wrecking havoc. It's him and a bunch of animals, and they're just charging through Elbaf, causing pain and misery to whoever he sees. And you have Hydruden trying to stop him pretty much, but you know Loki doesn't care. In fact, Loki is pretty against Harold's ideals, and we kind of got this idea that he doesn't like the ideals, but not necessarily that he completely hates Harold. But he's just like, yeah, this whole peace thing is stupid. We don't need to do that. We're warriors. We're Elbaf giants. We fight. And Hydruden is sticking to Harold's beliefs, which gets him a club to the face. Basically, Loki starts swinging on him. And it's funny because you have Gerd and like the rest of the new giant power. They're like watching Hydruden from the background. And they're like trying to not get involved, but Gerd obviously wants to help. And I didn't think about it the first time I read it because you see Loki looking over there and he's annoyed. And I thought initially that he was just annoyed because like Hydruden was weak, but looking further into the chapter, I see that he's kind of just upset that Hydruden has friends. But even so, he's like poking at Hydruden, talking about how he's weak. You know, you're just a bunch of weaklings grouping up. And of course, he drops the filthy blood thing. He even gets mad when people call Hydruden a prince. Like he's just absolutely adamant on being a terrible child to Hydruden. And in turn to the rest of Elbaf. And we cut to this point where you see him like going on this rampage of destruction, but you see like a mom holding her child, and Loki's reaction to that is, it reminds me of how he reacted to Hydruden, where he kind of like sucks air through his teeth, like he's clearly like gritting his mouth. And in the second one where he sees the mom and the kid, you can see like he's biting his lower lip, like he's obviously affected by this. And then we get to the panel where he crashes down from the upper tiers of Elbaf into the underworld again. And he goes, I can't even die. And he's bloody and he's tearing up and crying. So it's just so clear that the trauma that's been built up in Loki, all of this acting out, all this rage and stuff, that's all just based off of how Esther treated him. And him seeing anybody receive any kind of emotion just sets him off even more. And it's really sad to see him struggling like this because like he's putting up a front because, you know, everyone hates him. And so he's trying to play the part, but clearly he wants like people to care for him to the point where he'd rather just die at this point, but he just can't. And then we have the banger of the chapter, the crazy turn that I did not expect coming. We get some people pulling up on the island, and they all walk up to Loki because he's just crashed down to the underworld and he's still laying on the ground crying. And we see 4 people walk up. One of them Shiki. One of them's Whitebeard. One of them is, I honestly don't know. That might be Stussy. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think it's Big. No, it's not Big Mom. Can't be Big Mom. Right? That's not. I don't think that's Big Mom. Yeah, it's not Big Mom. She doesn't have a hat. And then the last one is Rox D. Zebek. We finally get a reveal of Rox D. Zebek and what he looks like. And he looks insane. Like we expected him to look kind of insane, but he definitely looks insane. So we got Shiki talking about Loki's face, saying he looks like a devil. And then we have Whitebeard, who's asking why the kid's crying, which I think is very fitting of these two. And the way the paneling is done, you have Shiki on one side, Whitebeard on the other, and then Loki in the middle. And they're like basically polar opposites. You have Shiki smiling, laughing at this kid, making fun of him. And then you have Whitebeard on the other side frowning, and he's curious about why the kid's upset. Very different mentalities, very different characters. A very nice way to set that up in the paneling here. But Rox pulls up, And he says, all right, I got 2 questions and you better say yes to both or else you catching hands. And before we get to those questions, there's a few pieces of narration that come through where it says, Harold spotted this particular man 8 years ago during the reverie. He single-handedly killed a Navy HQ admiral and vanished without a trace. This feat earned him a massive bounty and the government's ire. So, Rox single-handedly killed a Navy admiral and then left. And to put that in perspective, that's definitely a Yonko level feat, but the fact that he did it and then he just left, the fact that he killed an admiral and walked away, because like you would think, you know, Navy admiral, they're gonna have backup, they're gonna have something else, they're gonna send someone after you. No, he just left. Like he just got up out of there and they couldn't do anything about it. That's insane. But the questions he asks are, is this Elbaf and is Harold here? So the answer to the first one is an obvious yes, but as far as I know, Harold is still out on his voyage, so they're not gonna find him here. Now we do know that at some point Rox and Loki fight, I think it's more like Rox beats up Loki, but we know that interaction happens. I'm wondering if it's gonna happen during this period of time, because I don't know if Rox comes back at all. Now the other big thing that happens with this reveal is that we are told that Roxy Zebek is the father of Blackbeard. Now, this is pretty, like, it's still a big reveal. I think a lot of people expected that, especially once we started linking like, you know, the ship's name and kind of just the overall theme of Blackbeard to what Zebek was known for. A lot of people saw the parallels and were like, okay, we're thinking that Rox was Blackbeard's dad. But now we have the reveal, which is insane. And to just like drop it like that, like just part of the intro box is crazy. This opens up so many new things because now we have to figure out who Blackbeard's mom is. Where did Rox run into Blackbeard's mom? Like, where did he get the Teach epithet name for, or I guess I know it'd be Marshall. Where did he get Marshall from? Because he clearly doesn't take the Rox name. It's very similar to Ace, where Ace took his mother's name instead of his father's name. So I'm wondering if there's like a parallel there where Blackbeard takes his mother's name, not his father's name. And what reasons that there are that Blackbeard took that name. Now, it's very possible that Blackbeard doesn't even know his dad is Zebek. Like, he could be completely unaware because he was an orphan when Whitebeard found him, and Whitebeard had no idea who he was. So, chances are Blackbeard doesn't even know who his father is, which makes it even more interesting. But that is where the chapter ends, and I believe we do not have a break, so I think 11:35 is coming in next week. Y'all, this is a crazy chapter. I've been rattling on for like 30 minutes already just on this chapter alone. And there's so much more I could talk about. Like, this chapter was jam-packed with stuff. One other thing I want to mention is that Whitebeard was with Rox for a long time, because the caption for Rox here says, future captain of the Rox Pirates. So this is before they actually have a pirate group. So basically Rox, Shiki, Whitebeard, and whoever this woman is were strolling as a squad before. Like, it was just these four, which is crazy. Like, to think how long Whitebeard and Rox have been together, that's crazy work. And actually, now that I'm looking back at the panels, so as they're approaching, someone cuts off a mountaintop. Like, just clean cut shears it off. Based on what I'm seeing in the panels here, Rox doesn't seem to have any swords as weapons. Only Whitebeard, Shiki, and then whoever this woman is have weapons. So I'm wondering if one of those three did it. It doesn't seem like a Whitebeard feat. Whitebeard would probably shatter it rather than cut it. So I'm guessing it's either Shiki or the woman. But I hope we get more details on that here shortly. But man, oh man, was this a crazy chapter. You know, it's been silhouetted for so long, we haven't seen Rox. The fact that he just got dropped, you know, bam, Elbaf, Rox. Was not expecting that. That was not on the bingo card. And that just kind of elevated what this flashback was doing, because we were in a lull, I think, of like kind of interesting things happening where we had, you know, Shamrock show up and then Shamrock disappeared. We have Scopper show up, and then Scopper's kind of, in and out. We have Emu show up, and Emu's in and out. Now we have Rock. So we have all these big names here, and I'm imagining they're all going to come together at some point because a lot of this info is revolving around the same thing. So I am super excited for the next chapter. I cannot wait. This is such a great chapter to start the new season on. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check me out here. Check me out on the main channel, Tyrant King Kuma. We're going to be talking about chapters like this for sure. And I will catch you in the next one. Peace.